Welcome to our 7th episode of Men2Men. I'm Malik Carey along with my co-host Brett Carroll. Brett, how you doing today, man? What's going on?
Good evening, Malik. How are you?
Yo, man, I'm blessed, brother. I'm blessed. As this week being Valentine's Day, we're gonna interrupt. I know last week we talked about education, but we're gonna interrupt that series a little bit and just talk about Black relationships and Black love. And I know it's cold out there, Brett. You staying warm, man?
Absolutely.
All right. So cool, man. Let's get on this topic of Black relationships and Black love. What you got for me today, bro?
Well, you know what? Over the last 2-3 weeks, we had discussions around what women thought was a good man, and then after that, we had what men felt about what women felt. Mm-hmm. And during that time, they expressed some challenges that they had with what women wanted from them, and they expressed the challenges that they had trying to meet the expectations of their women. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, and like you said, it's Valentine's Day. It's Black History Month. So let's talk about Black love and Black relationships and what that looks like. And for me, kind of want to take a look at what impacts our relationships.
That's real good. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So there's a couple significant things that impact the relationships that we have, or there's a couple significant things that impacts Black love. The first one is the societal impact.
Okay.
Society itself and the way society is, whether you want to understand this or not, agree with it or not, impacts the way we see each other and the way we treat each other.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Yeah, you're not going to get any argument out of me on that one.
And so racism, believe it or not, has a very significant and underlying effect on Black love and Black relationships.
Would you say racism, or would you say that there's been a whole lot of residue left over from our past that has done it? And not to say racism in a whole, but I think it's more of the history behind racism and the history behind slavery that has kind of done a lot of damage. Would you say that?
Well, I was just getting ready to talk about not only does racism affect us, but our history affects us, mm-hmm. our culture affects us. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at the impact racism has, and we'll talk about that in a minute, mm-hmm. and when you look at the impact our history has, we'll talk about that in a minute, and then we look at the impact that our culture has on us, I think all of these experiences have had a significant impact on our ability to love, how we love, and to what extent that impacts relationships. Mm-hmm. And so as a result of all that, I kind of take a step back and look at our relationships as a journey. And the journey that we're on forces us to examine ourselves. It forces us to examine the way we interact with other people. And it forces us to try to understand how and why people see us the way they do, and then interact with us the way they do.
So I think we're going to first look at, let's look at how racism has affected Black love and Black relationships. Talk to me give me some examples of that, Brett.
Okay. So you talked a minute ago about how our past has, and the racial impact of our past has affected us. Well, mm-hmm. I'm talking about how racism affects us right now, and it affects us in several different areas. And I'll list them, and then we can kind of go back and talk about it. It affects us in the area of education, and we talked about that. It affects us in the area of employment. We'll talk about that. It affects us in the area of wealth and class or status.
Okay.
And gender choice and gender verification and criminal justice and law enforcement. So I mentioned those things, and you can speak on education, you can speak on employment, wealth and class, gender choice, gender verification, criminal justice, law enforcement, wherever you want to go.
No, I'm gonna go here. It was so great, so awesome. You talking about the employment or the educational status, and I can see where, especially for the young people today, when you look at that, there's a 1 in 8, I think. Young African American sisters in college is like 8 to 1. right? So when I'm looking at that, I mean, these sisters are struggling even to find some type of love, or relationships and build a relationship. And when we talk about relationships right now, we're talking about the male and female relationship. So, they're struggling, and then I look at even some of my sisters today who are older, who've gone maybe through a divorce or going through something, and they can't find a relationship. And most of them are educated. So they've put in their values and they're putting some of that stuff on brothers, and they're saying all the good brothers that are educated, that are available, that have some type of spirituality are married. And so it's been a big struggle that way. And so when we look at what education has done, I mean, it's filtered a lot of the brothers out because their brothers aren't in college. I mean, when we look at the last 20 years, you got more brothers in prison than you do in the college. And so, that's a struggle. And then when we talk about employment, again, if the brothers in prison, they ain't in the employment system, right? They're not working, and they're definitely, I mean, our sisters are smoking us as far as education and income, so education goes with employment, and we're not in the workforce like we need to be as brothers. And so they're saying, hey, what am I doing? What's going on here? And so I can clearly see where, the education, the unemployment, and then if we talk about prison reform and all of that, how it all ties in together. So, I mean, it's unfortunate, that, our sisters are struggling. And I was having a conversation, I'll be honest, this week about this thing to a woman. She was like, Malik, you don't know any bachelors? Any? I said, I got one brother for you, who meets your criteria, which was was educated, who loved the Lord, because she wanted somebody like that. But I don't know a lot of brothers like that are single.
Yeah, understandable. And see, so it goes back to this: racism affects education because we're undereducated, we're miseducated, we're not properly. The knowledge we have, or the knowledge base we have, is less than that of our sisters. So what happens is, the typical Black woman who is educated is less likely to be in an environment where she's around educated Black men. And so therefore the access that woman has to her brothers is less. And on the other hand, you have brothers who are less educated, and therefore they're not able to step up to the plate, so to speak, and be the equal to our sisters. And so therefore, and we all know the impact that racism has on education. So racism affects education. Education affects our ability with regard to accessibility.
That's what we talked about last week, right?
Yeah, and the whole employment piece. What makes this important is that every day we go to work, how many of us are, how often are we seeing us in the workforce? How often are we seeing our peers in the workforce? We're not. And so for those of us who do work, we're just not seeing our peers. And so our women are being separated from us in a sense, from an employment standpoint of view. And all that leads to is what we talk about, the disparity with wealth and the disparity with class.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
if you have a society, take any given city, any given society where, and again, we're just playing with some numbers, where you have 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and 65% of them are women. And of those 65%, 75% of them have good jobs, whereby only 25% of the men do. And so it's difficult for the woman to say, I make this amount of money, I'm not willing to step down to deal with somebody who makes half of what I make, or to deal with somebody who's not working, or to deal with somebody who's just not capable of working with me. And so there's this classism in this country.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's been designed that way. And when we talk about that, I mean, I think we talked about this in a few shows before, a couple of episodes ago, when we did talk about the object of, is there a woman who makes more money than a man? Can he still be the man, and can he still, show up? But I think because it's been conditioned, I mean, when you look at the YouTubes and you look at some of these TV shows and I got the power and woman's lib and all that, it really is doing damage to a man's psyche because I make more money than you, or I'm more educated than you, and so it really is, it's playing a huge part. And I think it's really designed that way. I mean, to just be able to know when I just, the alarming number is, when I went to Virginia State in the 80s, it was, I think it was 7 girls to 1 dude then, right? And so it hasn't changed. It may have gotten worse. And so when we start to think about that, even back then, all the sisters getting educated, brothers are not, and it's just that the social impact has been, sisters get yours, and then I start to promote, right? TV, radio, film, the strong black woman. And let's talk about that. I'm a strong black woman. I don't need a man. And so I think that's really infected. I like that word, infected our society.
Well, it's infected Black society, and it's affected Black relationships. So what we're saying here is that the impact of racism, the effect racism has on these things, makes it difficult for us to be together, makes it more difficult for us to come together, and it makes it more difficult for us to stay together. The other thing is the criminal justice system and law enforcement. And we don't have to even spend a whole lot of time on that. Bottom line is, there, like you said before, there's too many of us in jail. That's by design.
Exactly.
And when we come out, we're not prepared to be, we're not prepared and we're not equipped to be in quality relationships.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been institutionalized.
And as a result of that, we're not conditioned or to be in quality relationships with quality people. So I want to jump now to the second thing that's impactful, is that's the whole area of our historical impact on Black love and Black relationships. And you mentioned the historical impact when we opened the show, but let's talk about the failure of our parents, and then the failure of our own previous relationships.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So
when I look at the failure of our parents, man, I look at the grandparents, and I looked at how they stayed together. Granddaddy and grandma, they fought it out, and then out my parents, and they just couldn't do it. Right? They in the generational stuff, and unfortunately, my story, man. I'm not afraid to talk about it. My dad just couldn't do it. Period. My father had 8 kids by 6 different women. So I mean, what's the lack of morality, the lack of, I think it goes back to the buck, right? The conditioning of the African American man, and in the conditioning of that society. And we're talking about, my father was born in the 40s. What did they have, right? And so, in what direction were we going in as a society? And so when I look at the failure of our parents, but I growing up as a single, as a father, growing up fatherless. That's what I grew up with, and let's call it what it is. I did have a stepfather who was loving and caring, but when I look at even my friendships in the whole of most of the men, they weren't, if they were there, they were working. They weren't teaching us how to be men and have great relationships, because they were out working, or they just weren't present. And so, I think historically, man, we've just been fighting an uphill battle.
Exactly. And when you don't see Black love with your parents, you don't learn how to see good relationships. So if you don't see good relationships, how are you going to have a good one? And so that kind of leads, or bleeds, if I may use that term, that kind of bleeds into our own personal failures.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I had many of them.
Well, when you stop and think about it, until we get married, we can consider, I don't want to use the word failure, but not having the kind of success we want to have with our relationships.
And that goes back to not even understanding what kind of success I want to have, because when I came into marriage, you know, the first time I've been married twice. So, but the first time I got married, I was young. I had no goals. I had nothing that I just did. I wanted to be married. You know, I guess it's deep down. I wanted to do the right thing, but I had no frame of reference of what marriage was. And most people who get married don't have a frame of reference what marriage is. You get married, you fight it out, tough it out, realize that, hey man, this ain't working, and cash it in and move on to the next. And I think that's a big part of relationship failure. And then the brothers who aren't getting married, let's think about this. I mean, today there's only 20% of black people. We make up 13% of the country, but 26% of us are married. That's a low number, my man.
No doubt. And the other thing is, if I didn't have a good relationship with her, mm-hmm. and I drag that bad experience into the next relationship, didn't have a relationship with her, good relationship with her, by the time I'm on my third and fourth relationships, I have taught myself how to be a bad person, mm-hmm. and not be successful in relationships.
Oh, no doubt.
And so our own failures in our relationship, I hate to use the word failures, but
that's what it is. Let's call it what it is. We got to talk about it.
Our own failures in our relationships stay with us, and it mm-hmm. makes it hard for us to be good mates, and women have the same challenge. Mm-hmm. You know, they bring bad relationships into their next relationship.
Right. So we bring a bunch of baggage.
Exactly.
And we're going to call it generational baggage. Mm-hmm. So we bring a bunch of generational baggage into our relationships and relationship. And if we don't stop and get ourselves together and realize that, you know what, hey, after relationship 3, it wasn't them, it was me, then the vicious cycle continues.
Right.
And so we have generations of vicious cycles. We have generations of divorce. We have generations of people not getting married because they've had such a bad experience. The lack of relationships, the failure to, you know, be in there for 40 and 50 years. I know, Brett, you've been blessed, man, and I've watched you. I mean, I know you're you're in the 30s now. I mean, that's a long time. That means that you know, the lack of resiliency that it takes to have that relationship and to be healthy and to stay committed. And yet so many people want to throw it away when they get there because they've met some struggles, they've done some things. And at the end of the day, it's not enough. And a lot of times, you know, the relationships that can get there, that can get into those double digits, a lot of times there were kids involved. There have been, you know, other things that have kept them in there, whether it's been children or, you know, they stayed for the children. But after the children are gone, they're looking at each other and saying, you know what, I don't even know who you are. So, I mean, the ones that really have that resiliency, my hat off to them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. For me, it's the most important thing in my life, next to my relationship with the Lord, is my relationship with my wife. Mm-hmm. So, without a doubt, it's critically important to me. So thirdly, so now we look at the cultural challenges, which impacts our ability to have Black love, successful Black love, and successful Black relationships. And this is what we kind of talked about the last 2 episodes. And not to beat a dead horse, but clearly we have an inability to meet each other's needs. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm dating her and I don't meet her needs, relationship is shot. If she's dating me and she doesn't meet my needs, relationship is shot. So our inability from a cultural standpoint of view, we fail for the most part to meet each other's needs. And that's why relationships actually fail.
No, and I want to talk to that. I'm gonna talk to it from 3 angles. Our music used to be about love. It used to be about romance. It used to be about, you know, Marvin and, you know, and Luther, and it was about making love, and it was all about that. Man, what's the music saying today? Right? I'm not gonna even I have to go there, right? And then when we look at TV, we're the only race of people. You don't see any, I'm sorry, you show me one white show on TV that's depicting Black women and Black men the way they do, right? You got Love and Hip Hop. You got all of these shows, and I'm not trying to talk about them, But the degrading part, we're the only race that allows ourselves to be exploited on many levels, from culture, the TV shows, the hip hop music, all of those
The music
things,
videos.
the music videos, everything. You don't see any of that in other races. We're the only race of people that continually let media exploit us.
Well, you know what's interesting? In the 70s, it was called black exploitation, when white folks allowed us to exploit each other on television, like you said. Now it's black exploitation where we're doing it to ourselves. And I'm not here to downgrade or to throw any shade on the hip hop community, because I know how important that community is.
It has been, right.
And I know how impactful that community is on the entire world.
Right. But I'm sorry, but it's we're the ones though. And we're the people who've been exploited the most and degraded the most. I don't see white folks twerking on TV. I don't see, the violence and the level of all of that stuff that we see in any other race. I don't care.
No, you're right about that. And we do it to ourselves.
No, we do it to ourselves.
There's no question. And that's the reason why I'm glad you brought that up. So those are self-inflicted wounds. And again, it goes back to our culture. Music is a big part of our culture. And so, like you said, the music of the past brought us together. Today's music
is tearing us apart at deep levels.
Yeah, I don't know if we call it music. I'm not sure if we can call it hip hop music or not, but it's divisive. It's destructive. It's degrading. It's demoralizing. And so that impacts our ability to want each other, to open ourselves up to each other, and to try to love each other. So that's kind of deep. So we just spent a few minutes on talking about the challenges that we have. Let's spend a few minutes talking about how we can promote Black love and how we can promote healthy Black relationships.
Yo, man, I want to talk about that for real. I mean, the promoting part is we got to start to see, and I say this a lot, man, we got to start to see our relationships as valuable. We got to see them as valuable. Your wife is valuable to you. My wife is valuable to me. We don't see each other as valuable.
Good point.
If I see value in you, I'm going to treat you a certain way. Not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Man, but I value, and even we talk about relationship, but even man to man, right? I value my brother. I'm not going to do anything to hurt him. I'm not going to do anything to step outside those lines unintentionally. Because, yeah, of course, there's going to be conflict if you hang out long enough and love one another long enough. But when I value you, man, you my girl. Yo, you my dude. And what I'm hearing and seeing is we don't value one another anymore. And so when I'm in a relationship, this is my girl. This is my dude. I'm not going to do anything to hurt her. I'm not going to do anything to spoil this. I'm going to deal with my own unresolved issues, so that I can put a value on why am I here in this relationship. That makes sense, bro?
Absolutely. It does make sense. And the whole concept about not valuing our women starts with not valuing us enough, or being so self-driven, so self-absorbed. And to me, it's an extension of survival. It's an extension of this individualism thing. See, when you talk about not valuing our relationships, I think, and I could be wrong, you're talking more about the younger generation.
I'm talking about all the generations right now, brother. I got people in their 60s ain't valuing 70s. Yo, bro, I'm not talking about the younger. I'm seeing it across the board. I call them my young brothers. I call them, and I'm talking about some brothers in their late 40s, early 50s. There's adolescent men who don't know how to value a woman.
Well, let me hit you real quick there. If you're talking about men in their 40s and 50s and 60s who are adolescent, that's kind of like what I'm talking about, mentality.
Mentality.
Okay,
exactly.
So you can have a 50-year-old or 40-year-old who has a 20-year-old mentality.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I'm talking about a young person's mentality.
Yeah.
Where there's a selfishness
and a self-centeredness.
And sometimes it's they're conditioned to think that way, act that way, be that way by their parents. And other times it's a form of just survival. And so if I'm trying to get mine, right? If I'm trying to get mine, if I'm trying to take care of me, I don't have time to deal with you. And so I don't value you as a person who I want to partner with. I don't value as a person I want to love. I don't value as a person I want to do life with. If nothing else, I value as a friend.
As a friend.
And so friends don't have love relationships, and friends don't ultimately get married.
Yeah.
But so I want to talk a little bit about dating. And I want to talk a little about how you go about establishing a good relationship.
Right.
And then I want to wrap this up talking about how you sustain great relationships. And hopefully people who hear this, who are struggling with the whole concept of dating, we'll talk about what dating looks like. And hopefully those who want to establish relationships, we'll talk about what establishing a good relationship looks like. So you go back to dating. I call this rules for engagement.
Okay.
All right. So I don't know about you, but my whole thing is this. If I'm dating, the first thing I need to do is I need to know what I want. I need to know what I want out of a relationship. I need to know what I want out of a woman so that it's easy for me to quickly identify whether you're that one or not. If you are, let's proceed. If you're not, let's bounce. Okay. And you need to make a list of what these things are. The list could be deep, 10 deep. It could just be 3 deep, but you need to make a list so that you know where you're going and why you're going.
And I think a list is important. I think a list of what you're looking for in a mate is important. I had that. This is what I want, and this is who I'm going to be also. So what are your non-negotiables? I call it dating with a purpose. So yeah, right. I'm not just dating. We're not dating to be dating. I'm not going on a bunch of dates when I was single just to be hanging out. When you're young and you're trying to get what you get and do what you do. What we're talking about as adults or young adults, and I have these conversations with young people now that people didn't have with me. What are you dating for? Right? What are you dating for? Are you dating to get to know someone? Are you dating to go to bed with this person? Are you dating to establish a long-term relationship?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I totally agree with you. A list is very important. Make that list, men. Make that list, ladies. Know what you want. If you're listening and you're single, know what you want. Know your non-negotiables, because those are going to weed out a lot of people really quickly.
Absolutely. And I think the second rule for dating is you got to know what she wants. And so you're with somebody and you're attracted to them. You want to be with them. Most important thing for you to do is understand what she wants, because if you're not willing or able, time to bounce. Right. Otherwise you're wasting her time and you're wasting your time.
Yeah. And I see that so many times. You see a lot of these brothers, especially with a lot of the young sisters, they want to get married by their early 30s, mid to late 30s or whatever. They're talking marriage. A lot of the young boys are saying, man, no, I'm not ready to get married. I want to finish my career. I want to do something. Then what I call it is you're holding that young lady hostage, or even the man, right? The man may want to get married. I don't know too many that do. I think it's more the pressure of the woman, but a lot of times you don't want to hold the person hostage. And so knowing what you need, knowing what you want, establishing that, and being able to communicate that in the relationship early. Look, this is what I want. Don't waste my time. I'm not going to waste your time. And let's communicate about it. Let's not get to the table and realize, hey, this didn't work because we were speaking 2 different languages.
Right. And then the third rule of dating is what I call come correct. And that is
good. I like come correct. That's dope.
And that is, I know what I want. I know what she wants. So let me step up to the plate and be the best me, and let me step up to the plate and present to her the best of me. So, the old saying is you get what you want. You get back what you put out, you reap what you sow. If you're shady or shaky, and not the best that you can be, then you can't expect to attract somebody better than
who you are.
Who you are, or
It
better
goes
than
back
what
to
you are.
That goes back to what we talked about a while ago. You are who you attract.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's real important, in my opinion, to come correct, especially if you want this person.
Mhm.
This whole concept around dating is really centered to the people who want relationships.
Mhm.
There's nothing to do with people who aren't interested in relationships. This whole dating concept is around, I want to be with somebody. I need to date in order to meet somebody.
And I believe that, not to cut you off, I'm sorry, brother, but I believe everybody wants a relationship. I think we're built for a relationship. And you got some women who, oh, I don't want to be involved. I've been hurt too many times. But deep down inside, I believe all people want relationships. I believe that we're built and wired for relationship. It's that so many people have been hurt and battered that just don't come near me.
That's why we're having the conversation we're having. So we're breaking it down. Dating rules, dating rules for engagement. Rule 4, put your best foot forward and just be real.
And that goes back to, I think what you just talking about being real is having that early on conversation. This is what I want. This is where I want to go. And if you're not willing to go there, let's just say peace. Let's end it now. That's part of being real. Right?
Yeah, well, to me, being real is say what you mean and mean what you say.
Oh yeah.
Don't present yourself to be one way, and then me find out a week later, 2 weeks later, you're not that person.
But man, how many people do that?
I think a lot of people do that, and
that's the mask.
It's the mask. But I encourage people to just be honest and be real. Put your best foot forward. First of all, it's easier. It's hard to be something you're not.
But what if I don't know how to?
Well, if you don't know how to be real, I got some real simple advice for you. Just do you. See, I think it's easy to be real. I think it's hard to be something that you're not.
Right.
I think it's hard to try to impress people when you're faking or lying or deceiving or misrepresenting yourself.
But that's the feedback I get from a lot of sisters.
Well, that's the reason why we're trying to be real clear about this. When you're dating, 4 simple points: know what you want, know what she wants, come correct, be for real, put your best foot forward.
I like it.
Because that's just straight up. And if you can do those things, you enhance your ability to at least successfully date. And by the way, just want to say this real quick. I'm going to depart real quick. There's seven top dating sites for African Americans. Get my list here real quick. The top one is Match. Match.com has, or the Match dating site has 39 million visitors on a monthly basis.
Oh wow, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of folks, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot of details, but that's the largest one. The one that grabbed my attention was Christian Mingle, and that's a Black Christian dating site. So if you're a Christian and you want to meet Christian women, you go there. And then the other one that was interesting for somebody like me was something called OurTime.com. And Our Time, O-U-R, time, one word.com, is a 50 plus dating site. So if you're over 50 and you want to meet mature men, you go to that site. If you want to meet Christian men, you go to Christian Mingle. If you want to go on the top site for Black dating, then you go to Match. Okay. And then there's Elite Singles, that's 2. There's eHarmony, that's number 3. There's one called Zoosk, Z-O-O-S-K. What makes that different is it's actually a dating app along with the dating site. So if you're mobile and you're one of these high techies, then you want to look for Zoosk. Anyway, I just throw that out there for those of you who are dating, and those are people who are dating know about all these sites. But for those of you who haven't dated, aren't dating, want to date, that might be a way to get started. So I want to talk a little bit about so now that we're dating. So here we are, right? I'm dating her. I know what she wants. I've come correct. I've put my best foot forward. So now we like each other. We've agreed that we like each other. So now we're trying to establish a good relationship. So we're going to talk for a couple of minutes about what does it look like to establish a good relationship. So the first thing you want to do
is know if they checked all those boxes, huh?
And yeah, exactly.
Did they check those boxes? Can they communicate? What was the connection that they had? Like, I really like that. And do they have a foundation? Right. I think that's important. So, right, we've established, we've moved past the dating side, right? We said, okay, will you be my boyfriend? Will you be my girlfriend? Can we take this a little further? And if they checked all the boxes, now can we communicate?
Yeah. The big thing about checking the boxes is, as we said, when we're dating, we kind of know what we're looking for, right? We want to make sure that person, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. She's not perfect. There's no way we're going to have a perfect relationship. But, if you got 5 or 6, 7 different things you're looking for, make sure somebody's checking 3 of the boxes, 3 or 4 of the boxes, so that at least the person's in the ball game.
They made the list. They made the cut.
And as you establish a good relationship, the best way to establish a good relationship is being able to communicate with them. The best way to establish a good relationship is understanding that there's a connection that we have. We're not just talking to each other, but we've connected with one another. And then, Malik, to your point, if you can communicate and if there's this connection and if you've checked those boxes, then you ask yourself the question, is there enough for us to move forward? All right. And that's the discussion that you have with each other. And once you have that discussion and she says, yes, Brett, there's enough for us to move forward, then you sit down and you got to define your relationship. You got to make sure that you guys are on the same page. You got to make sure that I'm looking for love. I want to get with you. I see a future for us. You want to make sure that she has the same goal. Or if you're a woman, you want to make sure the man has the same goal.
Goals. And let's talk about communication for a minute. So many people show up here at Family Healing Center because they don't know how to communicate. And I'm talking about years. Communication is so important. But the thing is, a lot of us, going back to early on what we talked about, don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to listen to one another. We don't value one another. So if I don't value you, I don't know how to communicate with you. Communication is environmental. You were taught how to communicate. You just don't know how. And I say this all the time. When I do couples counseling, when I'm life coaching, who taught you how to communicate? And they'll say, oh, nobody, or my mother and my father or whoever. Yeah, you learned. Someone taught you how to communicate. It's readdressing where I learned it. If I grew up in a home that was a lot of yelling and screaming and fighting, fussing, that's what I know how to do. If I grew up in a home where there was stonewalling, that's what I learned how to do. If I grew up in a home where we communicated and we sat down at the dinner table and we learned how to do that, that's what I learned to do. And so we bring our communication styles into relationships. And so communication is that's number one. If you can communicate, you got a great relationship, because communication has to be so upfront and sometimes you got to over communicate. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is what I expect from you, from me. This is what I bring to the table. So really think about, as we're having this conversation, communication has to be at the forefront.
Absolutely. So we're establishing a good relationship. First thing we got to do is check all the boxes. The second thing we have to do is define our relationship and make sure we're on the same page. Third thing we have to do is we have to agree on negotiables and non-negotiables. And what do I mean by that? Let's say, for the sake of argument, she says to me, hey, Brett, I can't date a man who has children. It's a non-negotiable. Okay.
Or I don't want to have sex before marriage.
Non-negotiable.
Or, we're not going to live together until we're married. Or I want to get married and have a family, and I expect the same from you.
Right. So point number 3, when it comes to establishing good relationships, you have to agree on the negotiables and the non-negotiables. These are non-negotiables. These are deal breakers. These are things that we can talk about and need to talk about so that we can move forward. Once you get that out of the way, then we move to rule of engagement number 4 when it comes to establishing a good relationship. And that is, now you have to set realistic and attainable, what I call relationship expectations. So you know what's non-negotiable. You know what is negotiable. Now, what are our expectations going forward?
Yeah, and my rule. There are 3 reasons relationships break down and fail: unrealistic expectations, unmet expectations, and unspoken expectations. Can these things be met? Am I setting unrealistic expectations around my mate? Am I clear and concise about what those expectations? Because those are the ones that I'm supposed. I felt like he should have did this or she should have did that. She should have been inside of my head to know what I want. And then unrealistic expectations, right? Or the unmet, right? So I set this expectation, but he's not meeting it or she's not meeting this expectation. So then there's a breakdown in communication. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes me to the next rule number 5, and that is, once the 2 of you have agreed on what these realistic say that 3 times fast. Once we have agreed on what these realistic relationship expectations are, number 5 is we got to commit to them. You can't set expectations and then not commit to them. And so I have to commit to the things that you want. You have to commit to the things that I want. And that's a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month proposition that we work on every day. And if we're, like you said, Malik, if we're communicating, then we know we're on the same page. If we're communicating, then you know, if you're communicating with me, I know if I'm failing or falling short. If I communicate with you, you'll know where you're failing or where you're falling short. And as long as that communication is appropriate and timely and relevant, then we're going to help each other have this relationship. And then the other thing is to just be able to be forgiving and to be flexible.
Forgiveness is so important.
Yeah, yeah, and being flexible is important too, because they said the best laid plans of mice and men. We're all imperfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fall. We're all going to slip. We're all going to slide backwards. So you have to be flexible. You care enough about somebody, be flexible enough to realize you made a mistake. Forgive them.
Forgiveness is so important. I'm going to say that again.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that when we're in relationships, we're going to make mistakes, and as long as those mistakes aren't calculated or done in an unintentional way, you're gonna hurt one another. You're gonna bring your own pain, your own stuff into the relationship. And if I can forgive, and forgiveness is not for that person, forgiveness is so I don't hold resentments and I don't hold grudges, and I can see your imperfectness in that relationship, because no one's gonna be perfect in a relationship. And if I can say, please forgive me, I messed up. Can you forgive me? I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm going to work my tail off not to do it again. That's the most sexy thing a dude can do in a relationship.
Yep. And then number 6, if you're going to establish a good relationship, you got to make sure that you're laughing. You got to make sure that you're having fun, and you got to make sure that you're being romantic. And being romantic isn't necessarily being sexual. Being romantic is doing the things that helps you create this love language that has to begin once you establish a relationship. So what does that love language look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? It's very individualistic.
Right. I'm going to put a great book in there, Dr. Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. I think it's one of the greatest books around. Use the book, use the tools that are out to you, right? Because, I want to talk about this in relationships, right? I'm a gift guy. I'm totally gift. I love gifts and I love physical touch. I don't have time for quality time. And these are some of the things that are in the book. Now, my partner, who's my wife, she's quality time and words of affirmation. She don't care for gifts. So if I go out and I start buying her a bunch of gifts, she's gonna look at me like I'm crazy because she wants my time. If she starts talking about, hey Malik, I want you to spend time, I want to spend time with you. I don't care about time. That's not my thing. But we got to be able to meet each other where we are. And those are the things that the book talks about. So please get that book, Five Love Languages, Dr. Gary Chapman.
And that's a great way to segment into our final component, and that's sustaining great relationships. So you dated, you found the right person, you established a relationship, and now you're ready to make this thing last forever, or at least attempt to make it last forever.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. That's right. So we call this sustaining great relationships. We just got finished establishing a good relationship. Now we're talking about sustaining great relationships. First thing you're going to do is you're going to redefine your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we've been together 3 months. We've been together 6 months. We've been together a year. I mean, this thing is great. This is everything I thought it was going to be, or everything I had hoped it wanted to be. So you know what? I'm throwing my hat in to the ring. I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about that? Let's redefine who we are. Let's redefine where we are, and let's define where we're going with this. And that's when you want to be able to take the relationship to the to the 10th power.
Oh yeah, and I think that goes back to, going back to communication. Are we talking about our professional goals and our career goals? Where's this marriage going? Are we going to get married? Are we getting engaged? Are we're committed now? And what does that look like? Are we going to have children? Are we going to have family? We're at that level of commitment now. And when I'm at that level of commitment, now I can have those goals. And again, along the dating process, you're talking about a lot of stuff also. But when I look at that now, I'm in it. We checked the boxes. We've made the commitment. We're going to a new level. And understanding along the way, we're communicating these things and over communicating and communicating about our career goals and our aspirations and where we're going. As you said, those rules of engagement. Really, just now we're there.
Absolutely. And I think it's real important to sit down and really zero in on the relationship goals that you have, short-term, long-term.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's real important to sit down and have a conversation around lifestyle goals. And what do I mean by lifestyle goals? Well, I'm dating somebody who's a go-getter. I'm dating somebody who's a socialite. I'm dating somebody who's a mover and a shaker. Me, I'm chilly willy. I'm laid back. I'm not out there. I'm not. I'm shy. I'm not a social guy. So it's very, very important that the two people who've made this commitment understand what their lifestyle goals are.
And that's so true. I'm very much out there all the time, right? And if I'm always out there and I'm doing that, if my spouse is a homebody, or my mate is a homebody, how do we maintain that, right? Opposites attract. He's always away and she's always home, and understanding each other and each other's personalities and each other's idiosyncrasies and all of those things that make a couple, right? And make a power couple. What does that look like? What is a couple, again, with the goals, dreams, aspiration? If you chill Will and she's out and about, well, when it's time for you to say, hey, chill Will, honey, I need you home, then she needs to know she needs to be home. When honey says, hey, chill Will, I need you to be outside with me, and chill Will, you need to get outside with her. Understanding those things are so important also.
And agreeing to them.
Agreeing to them.
Because it doesn't necessarily mean I have to be like you or you have to be like me, but it's real clear we're different.
And then let me say this though, that's so good, right? Because in so many times in relationships, and we see it time and time again, the other person is trying to make that person them.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of appreciating the individuality.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're individuals. I'm not meant to be like my spouse. I'm not meant to be like my mate. That's why I'm attracted to her, because she should be everything I'm not everything I am.
Yes, I agree with that. But let's keep in mind too that, as much as opposites attract, a lot of times we are attracted to the qualities and the attributes that we kind of see in ourselves. And that's where this whole concept of what's that right word? Completeness is concerned, or you complete me. To get, I'm good by myself, but now with you, I'm even better. And you were great with yourself, and now with me,
We're even greater.
we're even greater. And so that's where compatibility comes into play. But this whole lifestyle thing to me is just making sure that you're comfortable with what I prefer, and I'm making sure I'm comfortable with what you prefer, because it could mean that our whole relationship, whether we're married or not, but we've been together for a couple months, couple years, and we're year 10. And the reason why we're still together and we're still happy is because I accept your lifestyle, you accept my lifestyle, whether it's different or whether it's very similar. Real important. Number 3, real important to really talk about professional and career goals. I think people grow up, they grow apart because one person all of a sudden, and rightfully so, says, you know what, I want to be this. I want to do that. I want to get a degree. I want to get a graduate degree. I want to start a business. I want to do this. I want to do that. Real important to understand what that is. It's real important to understand what your short-term goals are and what your long-term goals are as far as your profession and your career is concerned.
And I totally agree with that. And I want to speak to that in a little deeper way too. Is if I'm growing and my spouse is not, we're going to stay. One of us is going to get stagnant. So we have to grow together, whether that's taking personal development classes together, doing something, going on marriage retreats, or finding some type of something that's going to help you guys to grow together. And I do see that a lot, where one spouse or one partner has grown, and you look back and the other person is still sitting on that couch being chill will. So we got to talk about those things and make sure that we're growing together.
Yeah. And when I talk about professional and career goals, it's something as simple as this. I want to be a doctor. And my significant other says to me, wow, that's going to make me uncomfortable, because we came into this relationship, we were equal. And now 5 years later, you want to take your career and you want to grow and develop and become something greater, much greater and much different than I am. I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't know if I can handle that. I don't know if I can deal with that. So you talk about those things to make sure that they are good. My spouse might come to me and say, you know what? I want to start this business. And by starting this business, I'm going to be working 15 hours a day. I'm going to be working weekends. We're not going to be able to do the things that we used to do that were so much fun. I got to be okay with that. And so it's critically important to talk about, because I think that and this next topic or this next point is what kills relationships.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, but it keeps going back to the thing that we talked about, which is communication. I'm communicating where I want to go. I'm communicating, hey, later on, hey, I may want to go back to school. And those things, if they're established up front, then there are no surprises.
Yep. When it comes to sustaining great relationships, point number 3, you have to be on the same page when it comes to your finances, and you have to be on the same page when it comes to budgeting. And finances and budgeting, 2 different things. Financing is your financial goals are basically centered around net worth, like net, wealth accumulation. And I'm not saying you have to be wealthy. I'm just saying you have to understand where you are, what it looks like, where we are, number 1. Number 2, where we want to get to. And then number 3, how do we get there? So you have to have serious financial conversations, so you have serious financial goals. Budgeting is separate. In order to meet those financial goals, you have to budget. We have to talk about what budgeting looks like. We have to talk about who's managing the budget. We have to understand what our roles and responsibilities are to the budget. And so we move to number 5. Number 5 is, I think, also critical. You have a family. I have a family. To what extent
Or the family's going to play in our relationship.
Critically important. How connected, committed, involved are you with your family? How connected, committed, involved am I with my family? We need to agree on what
Those
that is,
things.
because we don't want that to. There's two things. Number one, we don't want to have any negative impact on the relationship you have with your family,
Mhm.
but we don't want the relationships that we have with our respective families to have a negative impact on our relationship either.
Amen.
So you got to come to,
And it has to be, yeah, definitely has to be a balance. And then, and then go have fun, right? I mean, out of all that, we do all of that. And, we're talking about people and we're talking about dating and all that. But for a few minutes, just let's talk to the married couples who may have had some challenges, or or still in the battle and still in the fight, and working through this black love thing. Let's talk about that for a few minutes, because we've gone through a lot, and let's speak to that for me, bro. You got a little more years on me in that marriage game right there.
it starts with what I call friends of distinction. You need to have friends who are there for you and friends who are there for your marriage. If you have close friends who are not there to support your marriage, they should not be your top priority. Okay. It's the old concept, who's on first? Are we on first, or are our friends on first? If our friends are more important than our relationship is going to be dissolved as a result of our friends. If our families are more important than our relationship, then our families are ultimately going to dissolve our relationship. So to your point, I think it starts with a couple of things, and it's being intentional about being intimate. It's intentional about about having romance. It's intentional about having fun. And I think when it comes to having fun, when it comes to being intimate, and when it comes to being romantic, I think you got to plan it. I think you have to plan it out. And I know in our marriage, we've been married now for almost 34 years. We've been together for almost
time.
and we've been together for almost 40 years. But the thing that we do is we sit down and we say, now we don't do it
together when you were 10, huh?
That's kind of you. That's very kind of. There's a couple of dollars under the chair. It got to a point where I had to sit down with her and I said, look, honey, we need to plan our fun time. We not only do we need to plan vacations, but we need to plan weekends. Not only do we need to plan weekends, but we need to plan date nights, because if you don't plan it,
even at 34 years, you're still planning.
You
date
have
nights.
to.
That's dope, man. For real, yeah.
You have to, because life is just overwhelming, and the stuff you have to do can consume you.
Yep.
And it can consume your relationship. Just doing things you got to do. So for me, I'm real big on taking care of business first, and then stepping back and taking the time, planning it out, and saying, okay, we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. And so when we look at our given month, there's at least a couple days
that we have for one another,
or a weekend where we're just going to have fun.
Right. And you're empty nester. So even to be able to still say, hey, listen, man, we still got to make time for one another.
Well, that's a different situation, because as an empty nester, we have fun all the time.
But I know so many that don't, because they're still putting their careers in front of one another.
True.
And so I want to speak to that too. I mean, don't take your eye off the prize, whether you're married or single. I mean, and I'm speaking to a lot of the married couples, because I see what shows up a lot. And it is because you've taken your eye off the prize. Your spouse is the most important person. And we're talking to the married couples right now. You guys are the ones that are setting examples for your children. You're setting examples for your children's children. And listen, fight it out. So many couples, I was talking to an attorney the other day, they're calling them gray hair divorces, where, they're cashing in at 60 and 65 years old, because, they realize that they've grown apart. And so if you've grown apart, grow back together. Just like you grew apart, that means, go back to those dating things we just talked about. Pick up some of those traits. Start dating again. Romance your girl again. Romance your guy again. Don't ever, what I'm going to say is, don't forget the basics.
Right. And for those who are at that point, they're gray-haired and they're ready to bounce, that whole concept of having fun and being intimate and being romantic is too late for that. For those of you who are thinking about it's over, it's done, go get help. Talk to people that you know. Talk to people that you trust. Talk to people who care about you. Talk to people who love you, whether they're family, their friend, or friends. Make sure they love you. Make sure they care about the two of you. Talk to them. And if that doesn't work, go to church.
Mhm.
Speak to a pastor. Speak to a lay pastor, a deacon, or someone in a spiritual marriage counseling kind of a role. And if you're not spiritual, if you're not religious, and you don't have any affiliation, then go get professional help. Go get counseling. Go get marriage counseling. Go get relationship counseling, and let somebody help you put the pieces back together. Now, that's for those, I know we're closing, that's for those who are getting ready to bounce. Now, for those of you who are still together and you still love each other, but you still want this thing to get better and grow so that you don't ever get to the point where you're leaving after 20 years or 30 years, plan on having fun. Plan on being intimate. Plan on being romantic. And continue to talk about the different things that you talked about when you first got together. Finance, career goals, professional goals, family and friend roles, so that nothing slips through the crack.
Exactly.
So that you don't wake up one day and saying, wow, I didn't know that. Or wow, I wish we would have talked about that. Or wow, I wish I would have talked about that. To your point, Malik, you keep coming back to how important communication is. Communicate.
And over communicate. Guess what, man? I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I just think that if we go back to what we talked about earlier, valuing one another, valuing the black love experience, and we can set examples and chart our course at different levels. I hope we brought you guys a good show. It's happy Valentine's Day to all those out there who are still in that battle to fight for our love, to fight. And we want to say happy Valentine's Day.
Congratulations to those of you who are experiencing black love. Congratulations to those of you who are in great, healthy black relationships. And the good news is, for those of you who are not, if you follow the dating rules of engagement, if you follow the rules of engagement for establishing a good relationship, and if you implement the rules for sustaining great relationships, then you too can be involved in a great relationship, and you too can experience black love.
And if you need help, call Family Healing Center. Thank you guys for a great show. Listen, we can be reached on Instagram,
Facebook, YouTube,
and SoundCloud.
Men2Men podcast. Men2Men podcast.
Men2Men podcast.com. Yo, we had a great show. We're out.